This is Law of Attraction Explored. I'm Tim Grimes. Some of you are probably wondering about my coaching, so I thought I would just take a minute to explain what it is that I offer. What I do with people is get real deep. And what do I mean by we get deep? Well, if you've been listening to this podcast, you know exactly what I mean when I say that. The kind of coaching that I offer is meant to transform your life. And I feel very confident that it will transform your life and that you'll enjoy doing it. And if you don't, to be frank, you don't have to pay me. I like working with people who want to go deep, people who are willing to explore what's going on the inside and realize that there's nothing wrong with them and that what is going on the inside is actually good. And dare we say it, what's going on the inside is actually God. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, you can always email me at info@radicalcounselor.com, or you can just go to my website, radicalcounselor.com. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. So I thought that we could go over some Coué today. If for some reason you're new here, Émile Coué is my favorite law of attraction teacher. And in my opinion, he explains these principles in a much more down-to-earth, effective, and practical way, while at the same time being incredibly profound. He explains all that stuff better than anybody else, in my opinion. I love many law of attraction teachers, but if I had to pick one, I would pick Coué to learn from. And this show is unlike most podcasts and YouTube channels and social media accounts. I'm not really trying to inspire you. I'm just trying to show you different ways of applying this stuff practically in your life that, even though it's practical, is also very profound. So in a way, I guess I'm trying to educate you about some of these great teachers, with Coué really being in the forefront, in my opinion. So I think I've quoted a few of these lines before, but again, when you hear them today in this context, they will affect you differently in all likelihood. This is from Self-Mastery Through Conscious Auto-Suggestion. And Coué writes, "Return now to the point where I said that we could control and direct our imagination as easily as we could divert a torrent or control a wild horse. All that is required is for us to realize that it is possible, a fact of which most people are ignorant. Next, we must know what means to use. Well, the means are very simple. In fact, without wanting to and without knowing it, we have employed them absolutely unconsciously every day since we came into the world. But, unfortunately for us, we have often employed them wrongly and to our disadvantage. The means are autosuggestions." Now, this is an incredibly powerful and informative paragraph. And something to remember is that when Coué says that we have employed autosuggestion unconsciously, he also basically means, for him, the unconscious is synonymous with imagination. So in other words, we have managed to imagine the wrong things instead of the right things. And the problem that many of us have is that we think it's impossible to, divert a torrent or to control a wild horse. We look all around us and there's seemingly all this proof that the horse is too wild, or it's impossible to have that water, that not flow all over the place. But what Coué is saying is, yes, it is possible. We can do it. And if we recognize that we can do it, then we can start implementing what we imagine to ourselves, what we suggest to ourselves, which is what autosuggestion is. Autosuggestion is what we are suggesting to ourselves, and we cannot help but suggest things to ourselves. Every human being, physiologically, is wired in such a way that we're constantly suggesting things to ourselves. This is autosuggestion. This is your imagination at work, and everybody has an imagination, whether you like it or not. And what Coué is saying is that if you realize that you can suggest or imagine things that you want instead of things that you don't want, you will realize that you can actually control that wild horse. And you will realize that you can actually divert that torrent so it doesn't flood the town, but instead supplies water to it. And this is easier said than done for most of us. And it's a gradual learning process. But the underlying philosophy that Coué is sharing, I believe to be true. And if you recognize the power that you have imaginatively, the power that you have by suggesting more positive things to yourself as opposed to negative things, and you start implementing it in your life is going to improve. Notice how we're not using any highfalutin spiritual language when we talk about this, because we don't really need to. This is the practical underpinnings of the law of attraction. This is how this stuff works. What you suggest to yourself constantly, what you imagine to yourself, is what ends up happening in your life. So Coué goes on to write here, instead of auto-suggesting unconsciously, all that is needed is for us to auto-suggest consciously. And here is the way to do it. First, consider carefully the things which are to be the object of your autosuggestions and decide whether the matter requires an affirmation or a negation. Then repeat several times without thinking of anything else. This comes or this goes. This is going to happen or that is not going to happen, etc., etc. If the unconscious accepts the suggestion, if it autosuggests, you will find that the idea is realized in every detail. Again, this is the kind of paragraph that you can look at constantly to remind yourself of. To, just word it a little bit differently, to paraphrase it, instead of imagining negatively what we don't want, consider what you do want, what you want to happen or not happen, and start affirming that it is going to happen or not going to happen. And if you do this where you're really thinking of it purely, suggesting it purely, and your mind buys it, if your imagination buys into what you are suggesting to yourself, then your life is going to change for the better. This is not something that is as mechanical as we make it sound. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of thoughts each day. So if you suggest, I want to be healthier, I want to be healthier, I want to be healthier, you do that a few times or 20 times. But if that thought doesn't really imaginatively fill your mind completely, then it's not really going to take. You have to imagine something fully. And what Coué says, if you get yourself into a passive state, a state that is relaxed, that borders on sleep, where you feel calm, and you suggest something to yourself, your mind and imagination is likely to take it eventually. It's going to start to imagine more and more that this thing is possible, that you are going to get what you want, or what you don't want is going to stop happening. You're not implanting one thought. You're trying to change how you imagine about something completely. And the way to do that is just you can state something, and when you state something, the words automatically pretty much produce a picture. If I say elephant, you think of an elephant. I don't necessarily vividly have to think about touching the elephant or what color skin the elephant has exactly. I say elephant, elephant immediately pops to your mind. The image immediately pops to your mind. That's not a suggestion. Now, if I say every day in every way I'm getting better and better, that immediately brings something to mind. And then the imagination will either take it or not. But the issue is, for the imagination to take it, all that stuff that counteracts it, that says you're not getting better and better, has to be out of your mind. So this is why we must persist in auto-suggesting what we want until it takes. And then naturally we will imagine what we want more and more. I hope that makes some sense. This is not about saying phrases for the sake of saying phrases. This is to affect your imagination. By stating a phrase, you will imagine an image or a sensation in your mind. And if you take to that image or sensation completely, if you auto-suggest it fully, then your imagination will accept it. And it will continue to accept what you want more and more if you guide the torrent of water or start to control the wild horse. I think you can follow what I'm saying. I don't know if I'm explaining it as well as Coué explains it, but what Coué is saying here should come through in what I'm telling you right now. Coué continues to say, please understand that autosuggestion is nothing else but hypnotism as I comprehend it, and may be defined in simple words as influence of the imagination on the moral and physical being of man. This influence is undeniable. As I always like to say, we are hypnotizing ourselves every moment of our life. We're hypnotizing ourselves, and we usually tend to hypnotize ourselves with negative stuff. Why not flip that around, realize it's possible to hypnotize ourselves with more positive stuff, and realize that our life can get better and better, and that other people's lives can get better and better, and that we can become a better and better person on a practical, pragmatic level. Émile Coué, really just a brilliant person and a master at explaining these beneficial principles.